Born in 1896, Curtis Eugene Chillingworth grew up in the West Palm area, the son of a lawyer, grandson of a former sheriff of Dade County and mayor of West Palm Beach. He studied law and was accepted to the Florida bar in 1917, then served a few years in the Navy before becoming an attorney in his father's firm. He married a family friend, Marjorie McKinley, and in 1921 became a judge for Dade County. In 1923, he became the youngest elected circuit court judge in Florida. He held this position for more than 30 years before he and his wife disappeared. Joseph Peel was a municipal judge in the city of West Palm. Responsible for signing warrants from city police, Peel also took it upon himself to warn his favorite criminals when their gambling dens were about to be raided. While sitting on the bench, he was also somehow allowed to continue practicing law, and in 1953 acted as a lawyer for both parties in a divorce. For this, Peel received reprimand from Chillingworth and warned he was on his last chance. In 1955, Peel told a client she was divorced, but he'd never finished her paperwork, so when she remarried, she became a bigamist. When Peel realized his actions could not be overlooked, and knowing Chillingworth was aiming to shut him down, he started to panic. Peel contacted two of his favorite criminals, Floyd Lucky Hazoffel and George Bobby Lincoln, and drove them to Chillingworth's house. Without telling the men who the target was, he simply pointed him out and told his companions not to leave any traces. He also agreed to pay them $2,500. Lucky and Bobby surveyed the property and bought a small boat with an additional anchor to help them accomplish their mission. On the night of June 14, 1955, the two men slowly made their way by water to the Chillingworth's beachfront property. Arriving around 1 a.m. on June 15th, one man crouched in the bushes while another knocked on the door. Claiming to be the captain of a sinking yacht, Lucky asked Chillingworth for help, but the plan quickly fell apart. Lucky drew a weapon and demanded to know if anyone else was in the house. Chillingworth admitted his wife was asleep. Lucky made the judge call for his wife, and when she emerged from her room, Bobby grabbed the woman and smashed the outside light. Lucky and Bobby taped the hands of the couple and led them to the boat. Marjorie did not fully cooperate and took a blow from Lucky's pistol. He said she was quiet after that. The boat initially drove away, but the engine did not last long. It had gotten clogged with sand from being beached. The boat drifted for more than an hour, and the two hostages pled for their lives in the meantime. Chillingworth offered more than $200,000 to his kidnappers, but that did not sway their intentions. At some point, Chillingworth told his captors how to get their engine restarted, perhaps in hope that would help change the minds of Lucky and Bobby. It did not. Curtis and Marjorie were equipped with Army surplus belts weighted with lead, and Lucky threw Marjorie overboard with little regard, and her bound body did not resurface. Both men turned their attention to Curtis, who put his Navy skills to use and dove overboard of his own accord. Curtis Chillingworth attempted to swim away, but the boat crept closer, and Bobby tried to put Chillingworth down with a shotgun, but instead of shooting, he used it like a bat, bringing the weapon down on Chillingworth's head. Now dazed, the kidnappers were able to drag the judge back into the boat and affix him with the extra anchor. Chillingworth was tossed back into the water and the men watched him sink. Returning to shore, Lucky phoned Peel and informed him the motor is fixed. At 8 a.m., a handyman arrived at the Chillingworth residence, hired to start on a background playground for the Chillingworth children. He found the house empty. At 10 a.m., Judge Chillingworth failed to appear in his own courtroom. The investigation into what happened to the Chillingworths began shortly after. Authorities were baffled, however, and they could not understand how Mr. and Mrs. could both disappear without taking any money, vehicles, or clothing with them. There were no leads, despite large rewards being advertised, and in 1957, Curtis and Marjorie Chillingworth were declared legally dead. It appeared there would be no resolution for the remaining Chillingworth family, but in 1959, Lucky Hilzoffel seemingly lost his ability to keep a secret. Speaking to a friend, James Yenzer, Lucky admitted he knew who killed the Chillingworths. Yenzer notified he and Lucky's mutual friend, now ex-judge, Joseph Peel, who gave Yenzer $8,000 to kill Lucky. Yenzer, however, pocketed the money and contacted the Florida Sheriff's Bureau. Yenzer and a friend invited Lucky to a little party at a Holiday Inn in Melbourne, where the three men drank scotch for several days inside of a wired hotel room, with investigators listening nearby. On Saturday, October 1st, 1960, authorities broke into the hotel room and took Lucky into custody. When told they had more than 30 hours of his taped confession, Lucky tried to cut his wrists in prison, but was found in time and eventually stood trial for his actions. The accomplice, Mr. Bobby Lincoln, was already in prison for different reasons when state's attorneys approached him with a deal. They needed his eyewitness testimony to convict Lucky and Judge Peel, since they had no bodies for evidence. Bobby was granted immunity for his actions in the kidnapping and murdering and testified to what has been summarized here. During the trial, Lucky did not try to cover for his actions, even admitting that Peel wanted him to commit more atrocities, including killing the state's prosecutor. Peel, however, claimed his accomplices were trying to set him up because Lucky suspected Peel of sleeping with his wife. Bobby Lincoln completed his stint in prison in 1962 and headed north. He later converted to Islam, changing his name and wanting to distance himself from his former name and life of crime. He died at the age of 80 in 2004. Peel was eventually found guilty of accessory to murder for the murder of Curtis Chillingworth. He was also convicted for killing Marjorie Chillingworth, receiving 2 life sentences. He was eventually released from prison in 1981 due to ailing health, and 9 days later was dead from cancer. Lucky Hilzoffel pled guilty to both murders and served 35 years, getting his sentence commuted in 1966. Set to be released on parole in 2009, Lucky had a stroke in 1992 that paralyzed him on the right side. He later died in 1996. During his testimony, one of Lucky's statements to the judge accurately and pointedly sums up how many feel about criminals of this caliber. People like us should be stamped out like cockroaches because they aren't fit to live with decent people. Thank you for listening to my Spooky Florida series, bringing you one spooky story every day in October. Please like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming videos.